morning and welcome to another FasTrax webinar. This is a weekly event we do every Friday at 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern, where we go over various topics of the FasTrax software. You can see a list of these events if you go to our website, goftx.com, choose the FTX Lifeline button at the top of the page, scroll down just a bit and look for that webinar button, choose that, and this page will give you a listing of all of our webinars that you can sign up for, a listing of all of our previously recorded webinars where you can view the recording at any time, as well as the option to sign up for the newsletter to be notified of upcoming FasTrax news and other webinars. Today we're going to be going over something that has been gone over in the past, but there's been quite a number of new things added. We're going to be looking at the POS settings. And there's actually so many settings that this is going to be in a two-part session. So you're going to have today's session and then next week's session will cover the latter half. So let's go ahead and open up the point of sale, and I'm going to log in with an employee that has permission to view the settings, and we'll get started. All right, so to get to the POS settings, you're going to go to the Actions button, followed by the Settings button, followed by the Settings button. And today we're going to be looking at the receipt settings, the scanner settings, the display settings, and the register settings. So starting off with the receipt settings, this first area, this is where we're actually going to select our receipt printer. Now, whenever you choose the drop down here, you have the option to use a serial printer. Some serial printers work, some don't. And guaranteed way is to use an OPOS compatible printer. When you choose OPOS, it's going to open up another two drop-down boxes here, your OPOS printer and your OPOS cash drawer. You would just simply, once those are installed, select your device, and then at that point, that's when they would start functioning. Below that, we're going to have our header information and our footer information. This will be, of course, what is shown on the receipt, header being at the top of the receipt, and footer being at the bottom of the receipt. We have 5 areas for each of these. Below this, we're going to get into options that have to do with what is on the receipt itself. So first and foremost will be the option to print every receipt. With checkboxes, just as a quick note, checked means true and unchecked means false. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. So if this is set to true, then every transaction, whenever the sale is finished and tendered, you're going to get a receipt printed out from the receipt printer. If false, then it's not going to print any receipts unless one thing is set, which we'll go over here in a bit under your credit card receipts. But the only way to get receipts out is going to be actually using the print receipt button. So at that point, if that's set to false, the cashier has to choose which receipts to be printed. It's a good way to save paper, and not every customer wants a receipt. The print number of items settings, if that is set to true, then at the bottom of the receipt, it's going to print the total number of unique UPCs, individual UPCs on that particular transaction. If false, that's not going to be there. Print barcode on receipt, if that is set to true, then at the very bottom of the receipt, there's going to be a barcode, and that's going to be the receipt and transaction identifier. That's used to expedite and accurately do the return process. Whenever you scan that receipt, it's going to start the return process and return products for that particular receipt number, that particular transaction. Below that, we have the print UPC number on receipt. If that is set to true, then in addition to printing the item description on the receipt, right below that will be the UPC itself. That's handy if you ever need to do a return on a product, that product's barcode is gone, and you can visually see what that UPC number is. So whenever you're doing a return, you can type that in and save yourself the trouble of having to actually search for it. The next option is the print you saved amount on receipt. What this will do is this will sum up the total of discounts, buy downs, manual discounts, any kind of savings for the customer. It will sum those up and then put that at the bottom of the receipt saying you saved X number of dollars. The extra feed before cut, that may or may not be used depending on your environment. This is a setting that what it does is when true, and it's going to feed more paper through the printer. before it sends the cut command to cut that receipt. So if you have a receipt printer that is continually having problems where it's cutting off maybe like the bottom 2 lines or cutting part of if you have the print barcode on receipt turned on, it's cutting part of that barcode off, you can turn that setting on, save it, and then that would then feed more paper through before it actually sends the cut command. Then there's the enable DVR feed. This is a setting, if you want to turn this on, it will feed receipt information through to a DVR system that's compatible and allow whenever you're viewing that DVR system's feed to see what's being rung up in real time. Print logo on receipt. This is going to be an option to whenever it's enabled. It allows you to assign a monochrome bitmap image to your printer, and every time that you have a receipt that's printed, it's going to print that monochrome bitmap image at the very top of the receipt, above your header. So if you have like a company logo you want to input on your receipt, this is a great way to do that. The next 2 settings, print receipt on no sale and print receipt on cancel sales, those are of course negative actions. Now, if you haven't watched the webinar on negative actions, I highly recommend you watch that. What this does is it allows you to, whenever it's toggled on as true, anytime you do a negative action in the no sale or cancel sale world, it will print out a physical receipt that the cashier can then stick in their cash till as an identifier saying, hey, on this receipt number, there was a negative transaction. Just a physical paper proof for their protection, letting everyone know that that actually happened. Now, of course, if you have that turned off, you can still run the reports on that, but this is just a way for them to physically have something to show for it. Then there's the print receipt with amount saved. This setting is used in conjunction with the print you saved amount on receipt. In the scenario that this would be used in, you would turn this setting set to true, that print receipt with amount saved. You would set the print you saved amount on receipt as true, and you'd leave the print every receipt set to false. Now, whenever all 3 of these are set up appropriately, what it will do is on any transaction where there's no discount, it's not going to print a receipt. But if there's any kind of discount on the transaction, it will then automatically print the receipt. Essentially, you're only printing receipts for customers that they can see that they visually saved money. Show excise tax as a summary. If the setting is turned on at the bottom of the receipt, it will show an excise tax summary. If there's any excise taxes on that transaction, it will then show that dollar amount for the customer to be aware of. The drawer must be closed after a sale. If this is set to true, that means that after the sale is complete, you have to close the cash till before you can proceed with the next transaction. If that's set to false, then you can have the drawer open and continue with the next transaction. Now, when true, there's an option to allow override. This will allow a manager to override that in case there's like a cash till problem, in case it like won't shut. Below that, we'll have our credit card number of receipts. This is going to be unique, and it overrides the print every receipt option. So for example, if I do a credit card transaction and I have the print every receipt set to false, if I have, let's say, 2 for the number of credit card receipts, even if that print receipt is set to false, it's always going to print 2 receipts for every credit card transaction. So you can have 0 up to 3 receipts printed per transaction for credit card being used as a tender. The number of columns, this may or may not be used depending on your environment. It has to do with the width of the printer being used, as in, does it print 44 characters wide, 42 characters wide, or 40 characters wide? That's going to be the 3 most common print widths for receipt printers. And then at the bottom, we have the option to test those peripherals. So moving on to the scanner settings, this is a very simple page. You have the option to choose your OPOS compatible scanner, COM scanners, as in serial scanners that do not support OPOS are not supported in the point of sale. Once you have that installed and you select it, you can test the scanner. Once it's claimed as being tested, you can then optionally capture the DL data. That's driver's license data. This will be used to capture a customer's driver's license information to a physical text file in the FasTrax folder, just to verify that your scanner is indeed capable of reading driver's license barcodes. And lastly, there's the scale settings. This is very similar to a scanner. It's going to be like an actual scale that you use to weigh product for like weighted pricing. If enabled, you just simply choose the port that's being utilized for that, what serial port, save your settings, and then at that point, it's going to be integrated with the point of sale. Next, we're going to have our display settings. The top area is going to be the pole display settings. That's going to be your actual line display settings, like a non-LCD screen. It once again supports OPOS devices only. There is no option for serial only devices. So once you have your OPOS device installed, you would select that particular pole display, enter your greeting, enter what you want to say at the end of the sale, and then the pole display will, of course, display those before and after the sale. Below that, we have our display settings. Now, any display, as in a monitor that plugs into your VGA, HDMI, DisplayPort, USB-C, whatever the case may be, as long as Windows sees your secondary display as a secondary display in your settings, then you can actually utilize that in the POS to use as a secondary or third or fourth screen. You would simply see those settings down here. You would choose that to enable that particular monitor to be claimed by the point of sale. And then at that point, it's going to start using that monitor. Now, if you want to use images for like advertisement purposes, then you can use this image path. There's going to be a unique image path per display. You would simply choose that option here and then browse to your directory where you need to place your directory for that image path. That would be images like advertisements for manufacturers, for vendors, for local businesses. You can use PNG, JPEG files, GIF files, any kind of image you can display in the POS will cycle through those while open. Then you have the digital receipt option. Whenever this is turned on, you then have the receipt timeout option. Let's say that I put 1 minute here. What it will do is you have a digital receipt, 1/3 of the screen. So as in this display here, 1/3 of that screen is going to be a digital receipt. So as I ring product up, it's going to show those products that's being rung up and added to the transaction as well as their price. After the transaction is complete, then after 1 minute, that third of the screen that was dedicated to the receipt will vanish and it will be a full screen ad once again. So during that actual sale period, 2/3 of the screen is dedicated to your ad and 1/3 is dedicated to the digital receipt. Then next, if you're using some of our premium modules we offer, like digital signage or uplifts, you can optionally enable those here. Moving on to the register settings, there's a lot to this page. This top left area, that's where you're going to assign the register number. Now, once this is set, this is generally never changed. If you ever plan on changing this, please contact the support team first to make sure there'd be no data integrity damages being done. The same goes for the store number. This would ideally be set one time before the store ever goes live, before it's run FasTrax. You can then use this change store hyperlink and change that store number. Once again, if you're going to be altering those at all, especially on a store that has already been up and running, please contact our support team because that could cause data integrity issues. Once these are set, you generally do not change those. Then there's the update store info area. This allows you to change like the store name, address, zip, phone number, etc. Now below that, we're going to have our safe drop settings. If you want to enable the safe drop option to where the POS will keep track of what's in the cash till and prompt the cashier for safe drops, make sure you toggle this safe drop prompt as true. At that point, you have to set your minimum in drawer, max in drawer, and prompt interval. So as an example, let's say that my starting till is $100. Let's say that my max in drawer is $500. And let's say that I have a prompt interval of 2 minutes. What this will do is whenever you have $500 or greater of cash in drawer, it's going to prompt you to drop down to $100 every 2 minutes. That kind of leads us into our next setting. That next setting would be the max safe drop skips. So as the safe drop prompt occurs, the cashier can either do the safe drop prompt or do the safe drop process, or they can skip that prompt. Well, if you have the max safe drop skips defined, let's say I have that for 4 times, that means the cashier can skip that safe drop up to 4 times. After that, it's not going to let them skip anymore. It's going to force a safe drop, or you can't ring up any more customers. Then there's the option to disable the pop drawer on drops. What that does is it's going to remove that pop drawer button on the safe drop prompt itself, meaning that a manager has to come through and actually open the cash till with like a their authorization or like a key. All right, so moving on, there's the Cash Next option. This setting is a button type that can be used to define a certain type of cash tender being utilized in your subtotal panel. For more information on this, I'd suggest you watch the POS button editor panel webinar. Then there's the POS widgets. That will be the little glyphs that are on the left side of the point of sale after you open it, like the show messages, the to-do list, the carton count, the customers. You can enable and disable those by, of course, setting that to true or false. If it's set to true, then it will show those glyphs, those widgets. If it's set to false, it does not. Then you have the pay-in text and payout text. These are going to be default text you can have whenever you utilize this button. Whenever you press those buttons, it's going to, of course, ask what's the amount being paid in or paid out, but there's also a description for that particular action. The cashier can type that, or they can choose from the drop-down and choose one of these predetermined reasons. Next, there's the price change text. If you're going to use a temporary price change, the cashier optionally can type in a reason why they're using the temporary price change. There's also the option to pre-fill those out so it functions just like the pay-in and payout text. The cashier can override the price and then choose one of the predetermined reasons. Below this will be the save panels to database, load panels to database, and auto load panels from database. This, of course, is used whenever you're editing your panels and buttons. For more information on that, I'd highly suggest you watch that webinar we just mentioned a second ago. And then below this, we'll have all of our miscellaneous POS settings. So disable weighted barcodes if that's set to true, then the system will not read weighted barcodes, as in they won't pull the retail price from the barcode itself. Those follow a numbering scheme. If the barcode starts with a 2, then that tells the system that it's a weighted barcode and to pull the price from the UPC itself. There's the log off cashier after sale. What that does is every time a sale is complete, the cashier is then logged off. Before a new sale can be started, that cashier or someone else has to log in. There's the log off after X minutes of inactivity. If you have this set to true and you put in, let's say, 5, that means that if the register is idle for 5 minutes, then it's going to log the cashier off. Allow visual age verify. If this is set to true, that puts the button in the bottom right corner of your age verification screen when you bring a product up that requires an age validation. This button can be optionally named whatever you would like by inputting the text here. But what it does is it lets you bypass actually punching in a birth date for that customer or scanning the license. You're visually verifying that they're of age. Then there's the return to main screen after sale. If that's set to true, then after you tender a sale out, it's going to carry you back to the main panel. If that is set to false, then it's going to stay on the subtotal panel after you complete the sale. Disable buy downs and promotions and price check. If that is set to true, then whenever the cashier does a price check, they will not see if there's a buy down and promotion assigned to that item. Do not pop drawer for $0 sales. This is most commonly turned on if you don't want the cash drawer to pop on, say, like an even exchange. Say you have a product that you're returning for $10 and you're also buying a $10 item. That's a $0 subtotal. There's technically not a reason to open the cash drawer. If that's set to true, it doesn't open the cash drawer. If that's set to false, it would. Show only active items when searching. Any item that is marked as inactive, if that is set to true, will not be visible whenever you're doing an item search. If that is set to false, then whenever you do an item search, you can see everything, active and inactive items. The price check show quantity on hand is exactly that. Whenever you do a price check, it will show you what the current quantity on hand is for that particular location. Below that is the enable modifiers. This is a feature pulled from the hospitality module. What it does is whenever you do an item sale and you have enable modifiers enabled on that, then and that item has enable modifiers enabled, then you can actually add and make changes to that particular item sale. It's most commonly used in a situation like the food environment where you have like a burger and you want to add extra bacon or extra cheese. The U16:9 layout, if that's set to true, then you're going to get an extra 4 small buttons to the right, 4 columns of buttons that essentially set your POS to widescreen. There's the option to force a resolution if you want to force a particular resolution. That will force it to 1024 by 768. Prompt when selling out of stock item, if that's set to true, then whenever that's turned on, if you sell an item that has a 0 quantity on hand, the system will say, hey, this item has 0 quantity on hand. Are you sure you're selling this particular item? That's a great way to make sure that if you're scanning every single product and you're keeping an accurate on hand, that the wrong product is not being scanned. Combine identical items, what that does is whenever this is turned on, if you have, let's say, 3 items on a transaction and you individually, and they're the same item, and you scanned that product 3 times, when you subtotal that, it will void 2 of those off and then add 2 back to the first time it was scanned. Essentially doing a multiplier, 3 at, then scan. So it will make the receipt shorter. It will consume less receipt paper. Prompt for price on return. What that does is anytime you do a return, it will prompt and allow the cashier to change the price of that returned item. Prompt for salesman. If you're selling an item that has a commission campaign assigned to it, what it does is if there are multiple people clocked into the point of sale at the same time, it will prompt who actually made that sale, who's going to get credit on that commission. Prompt for name when suspending sales, if that's set to true. Whenever you do a sale suspend, it's going to prompt for some kind of identifier. That way you can know when you're resuming the sale, you can look by the customer's name or some kind of identifier to know what's exactly on that transaction without actually having to resume it, look at it, and then suspend it again potentially. Then there's the tax options, tax manufacturer coupons, buy downs, and store coupons. Those depend on the state that you're in, if those need to be toggled on or off. Essentially what it does is if it's toggled on, it will tax the product after the coupon or discount is applied. If it is taxed, if it's set to false, then it will apply tax to the pre-discounted amount, apply the discount, so you're paying tax on the full price of the item. Allow overtender store coupon. What that does is it allows you to pay to essentially overtender use a coupon that is for a store that is greater than the value of the price of the item on the transaction. Restrict sales tenders. What this does is if this is set to true, you have this setup hyperlink that shows up. You can then assign certain departments to where they can only use certain tenders. An example of that could be like a lottery. You only want to utilize cash for lottery. This would be a way you could set that up to where credit cards can no longer be used for lottery sales. Do not keep age for suspended sales. What that will do is if you have age verification turned on and you scan a product and you validate the age, and then you suspend that transaction, it will prompt you to, upon resuming the transaction, to re-verify the age. If that is set to true, then that's how that would function. If that's set to false, then what it will do is it will just keep that. It will save that particular age validation. It will save that. So when you resume it, you don't have to validate it again. Do not show $0 kit items. This is used for item kits. If there's an item in that item kit that is a $0 value, then it will no longer show, if this is set to true, that particular item on the transaction. Prompt for notes on no sale, cancels, and voids. Those all have to do with negative actions on the POS. If you do one of those, it will then prompt you to input a reason why you're doing that action. Also, when you turn this on, notice that there's an edit hyperlink that shows up. Whenever that shows up, you just simply choose edit, and that lets you put in predetermined reasons why you're doing that negative action. Required driver's license validation. If this is set to true, whenever you have an age requirement on an item and you scan the customer's driver's license, it'll then show the customer's name and some information about them, where you actually have to visually validate what's physically on that license to what was in that barcode. So it's a way to make sure that there are no fake driver's license being used. Required description on open department sales. If this is set to true, if you're doing an open department sale, it will then prompt you to put a reason why you're doing an open department sale, because ideally you're scanning everything for item level inventory. If you're utilizing excise taxes on the POS flag, there's the option to apply that excise tax to the cost or the price of the item. So this allows you to choose what is that excise tax being applied to, the cost or the price. For steel scan for age verify, what that means is whenever you're doing any kind of age requirement on a particular item, you no longer can manually input a manual birth date, meaning the cashier can't punch in like the birth month, the day, and the year. You absolutely have to scan that driver's license. There's no other way around that. Now, if that's set to true, there's also the option to allow override. If that's toggled on as well, then that allows a manager to override in the event that there is no physical license to scan. Then there's the prioritize driver's license scan for age verify. If this is set to true, whenever you scan an item on the transaction that has an age requirement, it will say, hey, scan the driver's license here. That's the default action. The default action is no longer showing the option to punch in a birth date. It says scan the driver's license. The cashier then, if they don't want to scan it, they have to bypass a prompt by pressing a button to then go in and actually manually input that birth date. So it prioritizes driver's license scanning. Price check show cost does exactly that. Whenever you have the price check show cost feature enabled, whenever you do a price check on an item, it will show what the cost is for that location. Subtract percent discount after system discount. What that does is anytime that there is a system discount on an item that's being applied, if you're doing a manual discount, it will apply that after the system discount's applied. Otherwise, if that's at default, it will apply the manual discount before the system discount's applied. That's something you probably want to have turned on because that's a good order of operations. You wouldn't want to potentially lose money by over discounting an item. Prompt for an item on manufacturer coupon. What that does is whenever you have that set to true, anytime you scan a manufacturer coupon, it will ask what item that is being applied to. This is a setting that's going to be required if you're planning on participating in the retail scan data incentive programs with various manufacturers. Discount child one parrot quantity. This is used in the rare situation where you may have a purchase unit subunit item, where if you buy the purchase unit, the product is less than if you purchase the same amount of the subunits. Let's give an example here. Let's say we have a carton of cigarettes in 10 packs. Let's say that the carton is $50 and the packs are $5.10. So if you bought 10 packs, you're technically paying more money than if you bought one carton. Well, if this setting is turned on, whenever you buy 10 packs, it will then discount those packs to where it would be the same as buying the carton. return used current discounts. When this is turned on, it will ignore the discounts applied on the transaction if you're doing a return against a receipt, and it will use current discounts. The do not allow system discount with house accounts. If a house account is tied to a transaction and this is set to true, then house accounts are not eligible to receive discounts via system discounts. Do not allow system discount with temporary price change. That's a good setting to have turned on. Basically, if you're manually discounting an item using the discount button, then if it was a part of a system discount, that system discount no longer applies. To show min date and age, if you have this set to true, you can then choose the setup hyperlink and you can put in a label and an age required. That will show up in the very top left corner of the POS screen. Just a quick visual reference on your particular age requirements at your state for the product you're selling. Use return forms. If you're not sure what this is, I suggest you watch the return forms webinar. This is a way to keep track of specific customers and their returns. The AutoZ register, if this is set to true, then between these two time periods, let's say 1 a.m. and 2 a.m., if there are any sales on the point of sale and that particular shift has not been closed out, the register Z button hasn't been pressed, then it will automatically Z out. It will automatically close that shift. Enable return worksheets. If you don't know what this is, I suggest you watch the return worksheets webinar. This is a quick way to electronically handle returning products and keeping track of damaged inventory versus sellable inventory and sending that to warehouses. Force Joule sell limits and ID scan. If this is turned on, then all Joule UPCs, regardless of how they're set up in the price book, will follow the Joule item sell limits. For information on that, get in touch with your rep and also watch our webinar on the Joule sell item limits. And then finally, there's the house account. Include month-to-date spend. What that does is whenever you have that enabled, there will be an additional column when you're looking at house accounts on the point of sale to see what that month, what's the total money they've spent so far. All right, well, that covers everything that we're going to cover today. Receipt settings, scanner settings, display settings, and register settings. I hope everybody's learned something. Once again, these webinars happen every Friday at 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern. You can see a list of these events if you go to our website, goftx.com. Choose the FTX Lifeline button at the top of the page. Scroll down just a bit on that next page and look for the webinar button. And that webinar page will show you upcoming events, previous recorded events, and then a way to sign up for the newsletter. If you have any questions on this topic, let us know at websupport@FasTraxPOS.com. And if you have any suggestions for future webinar topics, let us know at info@goftx.com. Thank you and have a great weekend.